Hi, welcome. I'm Jennifer Gunner. I'm the director of the Institute for Advanced Study at the University of Minnesota, and this is like an unbelievable treat for me to be in this space. And the IAS is very happy to be co-sponsoring with the McKnight Artists program and Mary Ellen Child, who we miss in Northrop very, very much. But this is such a great place to be. And so we're very happy to be co-sponsoring this conversation today on longevity and transformation. And I have the very difficult job of introducing the moderator. So I was going to say that I had to come today because the moderator's blog post has a coffee cup in front of her face. So, but the truth is, I know the moderator, so I already knew what she looked like. But Pamela Espeland is the Artscape columnist for MinPost. She covers the arts and culture news events in the Twin Cities and beyond. She also writes for the Star Tribune, for National Public Radio, and at mnartists.org. And she's an art hound for Minnesota Public Radio. I think probably the only one I've actually met personally. And she blogs at bebopified.com. And she's also a member of the Jazz Journalists Association. So I think of her as a true connoisseur of all forms of art and knowledge. And we're lucky because she'll be our moderator today.
It's extremely generous and inaccurate. I'm just running around a lot, that's all. So, okay, welcome to a panel that's been named Longevity and Transformation. It's a discussion from the McKnight Foundation and the Institute for Advanced Study. They're putting it out together. And it was inspired by our 2015 McKnight International Artist, Gioconda Barbuto. Okay. She has had and continues to have a long and illustrious career and has undergone many significant changes. And that's the topic of our conversation today. We brought together a multidisciplinary group, thank goodness, not all dancers and choreographers, from dance, theater, and music to talk about change, responding to change, affecting change, and learning from change. And we have 4 really amazing and accomplished women in our midst today. And each is becoming even more amazing and accomplished at the moment. And they're all enjoying active and productive and passionate careers in the arts, which I think is a comfortable thing. Their lives have taken many twists and turns, and today we're going to learn something about the challenges they've faced and the choices they've made and maybe what they would have done differently. I always like that part of the conversation. Let's see if we can get to that, if anything. Gioconda Barbuto is our 2015 McKnight International Artist. She's an Italo-Canadian dancer, choreographer, and teacher. Her career so far has spanned 3 continents and multiple dance companies. She began with the Royal Winnipeg Ballet and the Minnesota Dance Theater. We have some local connections here. Before becoming a soloist with the Canadian company. You're going to say it in French.
I'm so sorry. I'm not laughing at her.
No.
Le Grand Ballet Canadien. Because she had asked me to do that and I didn't come in fast enough. So Le Grand Ballet Canadien.
Thank you so much. In Montreal, which is coming to Northrop this season, by the way. She spent 16 years there. In 1998, she joined Nederlands Dans Theater III in The Hague, Holland, where all the dancers are over 40. She toured internationally with that company for 8 years. She's won many grants and awards and performed independently with many companies, and her works have been presented all over. And if I actually listed all of these things, we would be talking entirely about her for the rest of the time, so I have to skip and condense a little. And as our McKnight International Artist, she'll be creating new work for 2 Dance to be performed in November at the O'Shaughnessy. So that's why she's here. I think there are 2 two-week residencies.
Actually, I think for 2 weeks, 1 more week now, and then 1 week when I come back.
Okay.
So it's a total of 2 weeks.
And where are you based right now?
I'm based in Montreal,
Okay.
but I sort of haven't been home for a while.
We can talk about that too. Toni Pierce-Sands there. is co-founder and artistic director of Two Dance. Earlier, she also performed with Minnesota Dance Theater, where she and Gioconda met. She has also performed with companies in Germany and Paris, and was the featured soloist with the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, which is a huge big deal. In Minnesota, she's been a guest performer with Guatemala, Shapiro and Smith, Vocal Lessons, Stuart Pimsler, and other companies. She's also the director of University Dance Theater at the University of Minnesota. She's received a McKnight Artist Fellowship in Dance, a SAGE Award as Outstanding Dance Educator, and you all know the SAGE Awards are happening on Tuesday night at the Coles. She also received an Emerald Service Award from the Links Incorporated for her service in the arts. Leah Cooper, on my left, in the lovely orange, has been directing, producing, and managing theater for 30 years. She founded her first theater company precociously in Los Angeles at age 17. Then she worked for 10 years as a software engineer and business consultant. Then she was executive director of the Minnesota Fringe Festival for 5 years, and under her watch, the Fringe increased attendance and achieved financial stability. Leah today is a freelance stage director and executive director of the Minnesota Theater Alliance. She's directed plays for Workhouse Collective, Park Square, History Theater, Mixed Blood, Commonweal, Theater in the Round, Gremlin, and more. If you go to theater, you've probably seen one of her plays. She's co-artistic director of Wonderlust Productions, an ensemble creating new plays driven by community stories and participation. Topics include veterans, adoption, I think also state workers in the Capitol. You're working on something there too. So it's a very interesting process. She's partner and co-founder of the Minnesota Playlist website, which I hope you all know about and read. Mary Ellen Childs, on my far left, is a freelance composer and the artistic director of Crash, a 4-member group that performs her visual percussion works. So this is music with movement. It's a very, very, very shallow definition. Okay, I'm sorry. Her compositions bring music, dance, and theater together in an unusual and fascinating way. She composes for drummers on wheels, cymbal players on rolling stools, trombone quartets, accordionists, and also for the more traditional string quartets, chamber groups, vocal groups, concert bands, and she has written an opera. Her works include clapping games, ham boning, which I had to look up, stomping and slapping your body, and baseball coaching signals. Several of her works are available on CD, some from Innova from the Composers Forum. She's received commissions from Cronus Quartet, the SPCO, the Walker, Opera America, and others. She's won fellowships and support from the United States Artists, Bush Foundation, McKnight, Jerome, the NEA, Minnesota State Arts Board, and the Knight Foundation. She is also the winner of the SAGE Award, and her work has been performed around the world. Her group, Crash, will perform in Cuba this fall. And we know that she's program director for the McKnight Artist Fellowships for dancers and choreographers, but we're talking today with and about Mary Ellen, the composer. So, we'll start with Gioconda. Tell us what happened when you retired from the Montreal Ballet.
When I left Le Grand Ballet, it was during my last year of Le Grand Ballet, I had let my director, Larry Rhodes, who is now the director of Juilliard, know that I would be leaving the company because I wanted to pursue my choreographic career, but also as an independent artist, so on and so forth. And he always said to me, but you could dance for at least 10 more years with the company. I was 40 at the time, approaching 40 that year. But during that year, I witnessed, we were talking about how we get moved by theater and dance sometimes and how you feel after watching an incredible show. And I had the opportunity, at Nederlands Dans Theater III came to Montreal. I went to this performance and I couldn't move after the show. I was so moved by them. I wanted to sit still and just digest what I had just seen. These dancers over 40 moved me in a way, it moved me to stillness, if you know what I mean, to that moment where you're so moved that you have to be still to digest it. To see these incredible artists in their 40s and till death, as Jiri says, so much history in their body, communicating in such a way that the expression was really just real, very, very real, very at the moment, very honest and sincere. And I just watched them thinking, that would be like a dream come true to be part of this company. This could never happen to me because it's so big, it's so not possible, but I was moved. And it's strange what happens. That response must have generated something in me because I expressed it to my director at the time, and then that year, one of the regisseurs, one of the people who set Jiri Kylian's works, in other words, come and stage the works for Jiri Kylian, came to Les Ballets, and that year I got to dance one of Kylian's works. Jiri Kylian is the director of Nederlands Dans Theater III at that time. And I was chosen to be in the work, and I was just, so I had just seen them perform. Then I get chosen to be in one of his works for Les Ballets, my last year there. I was so excited. It was like little stepping stones were happening. But never would I foresee anything more than that. And then I finished my season with Les Ballets, and I went off and I started choreographing and fulfilled all these contracts I had in a lot of independent works. And I was away in Spain, and I came home about a year and a half later, and I received a fax. In those days, fax, you know, way back, 98. And this long fax, Nederlands Dans Theater, is hanging outside of my phone, my fax machine. And my heart just started to beat really fast. I was just like, what? Why do I have a fax from Nederlands Dans Theater? Like, that's like not possible. What's that all about? And I told my husband, could you go read that for me, please? Like, I was afraid to read it. I was like, could you just read that for me? What is that? And it was an invitation to meet Jiri Kylian and to audition. Well, they didn't call it an audition, but audition. I went there, and a long story short now, sorry, I'm going on, it's just because it was so exciting. I was supposed to be there for a week. They flew me there. They wanted to meet me. Jiri puts it, we would like to meet you. And their purpose was this, they were trying to find the right mix, basically, where people just worked. They would bring us in a room, we would improvise, we would work through different tasks, and la 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 la. And we just, I think what he was doing, he was just sensing how we were in the room, how we worked together, how it felt, how we responded. And then I was supposed to be there for a whole week before I find out. That day, he said, they all told us that the next day Jiri would take us separately. We had people from Bayshore, all over the place. And I was sitting in the hallway eating my fruit with my leg warmers on and, you know, kind of eating my post-workout food. And all of a sudden he looks at me and goes, Choco. And I went, nobody calls me Choco, just my mother calls me Choco. How does he know that? And he goes, Choco, come with me. I was like, now? Okay. I'm like, I had like sweatpants and my hair is like this and I just finished sweating and I'm eating fruit. And he just wanted totally improvise this moment in my life, spontaneity, talk about. I went, in my head I just went, go, no excuses, doesn't matter, just go. He's asking you to go with him, following, go in the room, and he says, let's play. He's like, okay, tell me a little about yourself. And he was all excited, and then he'd say, what kind of work are you creating? And I said, oh, I just finished the solo, but I didn't bring any music. I didn't think I would be showing it. He says, it doesn't matter. And he made me talk about the whole solo while I was doing it. Luckily, this is stuff that was sort of built into my solo already, but I had a blast. And something magic happened to me. I kind of took the energy that he was giving me, and he was giving me a certain energy. I took it, And I kind of just played with that, and then he was giving me commands in a very nice way of what he would like to see while I was doing the solo. And it was like we were just give and take, push and pull, pulling back and forth with each other, and it just, and at the end of it he says, "You're hired."
Mhm.
And that's what happened. It was magic. So that was a little bit unbelievable, but I phoned my husband and I said, I said, "What are we going to do?" He says, "There's no question, you're going. This is your dream come true. You're going and we'll work out the rest." And so we said never 6 weeks apart. My husband had worked, he's a freelance photographer, but we managed to work everything out in I stayed for 8 years. It's kind of a magic moment, but I think all the stuff that happened before me, and I bring this up for a reason, seeing them, being affected by it, the next stepping stone to be doing a work of his. In the long run, apparently, they were one of the contracts that was that left. It was actually Martina and Pamela at the time had left, and they had asked around for dancers over 40. And so the ones that we were all sort of called in, and that's what happened. So my director was influencing this moment as well. The person who taught me the Kylian role was part of the table of the panel of people saying, "Hey, do you know this person? Oh, we work with so-and-so. She's, over 40, blah, blah, blah." So all our little stepping stones, all our acquaintances, all the, like I said with Abdul, everything we leave behind is part of what instigates the longevity, what happens next, what is part of the beginning of this was a seed that became something else later. I really believe in that. So
Sometimes it's recognizing the connections too.
Yeah.
I think we're just going to modify this to longevity, transformation, and fate.
Yeah. Maybe, yeah. So
So,
it was an unbelievable dream that came true. I never in my life ever would expect that I would be working with these people, ever. Never expected that, no.
thank you.
No, that was long, I'm so sorry. Yeah, it was a little long.
It's okay. I found it interesting.
Yeah.
Toni,
Yeah.
you grew up here, danced at Minnesota Dance Theater. You went to New York, and you danced, well, you did other things in between, but you were in New York. You made it as a dancer. You were a major dance company doing important work. What brought you back here?
What brought me back to Minnesota? I think, well, first of all, there's this saying at Ailey that the saying is, there's life after Ailey, which actually is quite extraordinary because the Ailey organization, and as a dancer, and as an African-American dancer in the United States, there are not many companies on that level that become our opportunities. And so life after, so here you are in a company that is world-renowned, and you're doing amazing work, and your vision, it's not about your goal, but this vision starts to kind of, as a young dancer, you're like all over the place, and I'll get to why I came back, but I think the primary is important, is that the vision as a younger dancer is everything is accessible, and then that starts to narrow, and why is it not accessible, and what is accessible, and all of those things. And so my life started to narrow as it started to broaden, and so narrow and focus into the Italo-Canadian American Dance Theater. And once I narrowed into the Italo-Canadian American Dance Theater, then everything else opened up. Living in New York City and doing incredible work, and the first time I was with the company, Mr. Ailey was still present and alive. And then there became a point, I left the Ailey company, moved to Europe, I had a son, there was this beautiful time of my life, had my son, and then rejoined the Ailey company under the direction of Judith Jamison, and met my husband. And then that time there was kind of a lot of trials and tribulations for me because my son was now a certain age. He had been traveling on the road. you know, I'm asking people, when is the time to? So there was always this sense of balance, you know, and between my career and myself, and then the beautiful realization that I always had this little boy knocking on the outside door or the inside door, you know, keeping me aware. And so why I came back was actually to reignite with my son, get grounded, and then that we would move back to New York City. At the time, Ms. Jamison was looking for a position for me in the organization. And then Jiri, my husband, followed me, and I was so upset because I really wanted to go back to New York. I had no reason to stay in Minnesota. And he said, you know, we should stay in Minnesota and we should take our time to sense the environment, sense the community, and then add to the community. Let's see what we can bring to the community. So, excuse me, my intention was never actually ever to come back to Minnesota. And now it's been 20-something years.
Remember that long?
Yeah. So my story of why Minnesota, I still am in denial. I still think I'm going back to New York. I still am like, we're going back to New York at some point. Excuse me, but the possibilities of creating, creating my own life and kind of my own legacy, from legacy, and bringing legacy was really important, and bringing legacy back to Minnesota from just my part, yes, it's only a part of my career. And I still wake up in the morning and go, okay, this is okay. It's okay to be home. I say this is my family home, and New York is my own home, where I grew up. So that's why I came back to Minnesota.
So you saw it as an opportunity and not as a setback?
I saw it as an opportunity through someone's eyes.
Okay.
And now I see the opportunity is not the opportunity for self, but opportunity for others with my existence. So there was a certain sacrifice of my individual dancer career in some ways, and shifted that individual focus into a broader focus that was encompassing others and giving access and availability to a career that gave me so much.
So part of succeeding with change is the willingness to change direction.
Maybe not it's willing. Maybe it's not willingness sometimes, you know, because it's not always so clear. But the ability to put yourself in a position, again, of unknowing. And that we talked about this at lunch, we actually always have our own permission to change. Right? So I still have permission to change, and I still have choice.
You also bring something to Minneapolis that it would not be having if you and your husband were here.
Absolutely.
And, you know, New York and San Francisco, but we have a need to go through that, learn from it, see what it's like.
Thank you.
And at the same time, we have this really active and vibrant dance community. And have at it. So this is a good place to bring in your own unique approach to it.
Yeah.
At least it would be welcome.
Yeah. And creating access for young people to become a part of that community and shift that community.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Leah mentioned that I think you called yourself a dilettante during lunch. I don't know if I would use that, but she's done a lot of things. And what I was curious when I was learning about her was she was in business for a long time. She started a theater company, and then she worked in business, and I'm guessing you had a job that you had to show up at. This is not, by the way, a 9-to-5 group. I'll just tell you that. What drew you back out of that into the arts? Was there a moment? Was there an invitation? Was there an opportunity? Were you bored? What was it?
Yes, all that. Maybe it's important to say why I ended up a software engineer
Okay.
briefly. So, let's see. Okay, so when I was a kid, I was really shy. Really shy. No speaking out loud. And I was also a math prodigy. And then in high school, a guidance counselor was very concerned at how many, I skipped 2 grades, so I was so much younger than everybody and so much smaller than everybody. Maybe that's why I was shy. In any case, a guidance counselor said, I'm really concerned about how much academics you're taking. I was already in junior high school, I was taking all my math in high school. By the time I started high school, I was taking all my math at university, and then I was doubling up on showing up at school at 6 o'clock. In any case, he said, you know, you need some arts. I said, no, I don't. He said, I'm giving you a choice. You could choose between ceramics and theater. And I was shy, so I said ceramics. And ceramics was full, so completely against my will. The very first day of class, it was this really simple exercise, if you've ever taken acting, you know. It was sit there. Pretend that you're waiting outside the principal's office, you're in trouble, and just sit there. Try not to do anything except sit there. And so, and of course, I made myself small and hid, and I was last, and everybody else just sat there. It was fine. And I don't know why, but on me, he chose to vary it up. So I sat there, terrified, and he snuck around through the wings and came out and pretended he was the principal. Well, Leah, what have you done? And I vomited on his feet. Because that's what I did when I was scared, right? So, well, then, of course, he felt terrible, and so he took me under his wing. So that was, I think, fateful. And I, like a lot of people, I sort of bloomed. I learned how humans worked in theater. It was so exciting to me. And I had this amazing opportunity. Johns Hopkins University wanted to study math prodigies. If you could get a certain score on a certain test, they would give you a full ride. So at 13, I was offered a full ride at Johns Hopkins University. But by then, I had fallen in love with theater. And I said, no, thank you. I'd like to make theater. Everybody was very disappointed in me. But so then I pursued theater, and I started a theater company.
And 17.
It's as hubristic as it sounds. And I ran it until I was about 24. And at 24, I was jaded and tired.
This was Los Angeles.
Yes. It's hard to make theater. It's really hard to make theater in Los Angeles. Everybody would rather be making film, and they treat theater as a showcase for film. And I was serious. And by 24, I did one of the very first AIDS plays on the West Coast, and I'd already lost friends to AIDS, and the critics were hard on it because I was 24 and knew what the hell I was doing. And we closed early, and it broke my heart. And around the time that show broke my heart, I also found myself scraping change off the bottom of my car to make a utility bill, and I suddenly had this moment where I thought, I don't have to be this poor, and I don't have to put up with this criticism. I quit, and I think I succeeded in quitting for like a year. But I stopped thinking of it as a career, and I remembered that I was good at math, and I went off and became a software engineer and did theater as a hobby on the side. And I was a software engineer for 10 years, and I was good at it, but it was interesting for about 5 years, and then I was just really bored. And so much of what I got hired to do was build things for big corporations to use to replace humans with technology. I didn't see it making anybody's life better. And so that started to break my heart. So now to answer how I got back, I was dating a boy, and he was from here, and he drew the short straw in his family to come home and take care of an elderly member of the family. And we did the long distance thing for a bit, but I was really bored with Los Angeles, and I was a freelancer. And he said, why don't you come stay in Minnesota until she dies? It's supposed to be a few months, right? And I was like, Minnesota, that's by like Canada, right? I knew nothing. And I was like, you guys have like one theater, I've heard of it, it's the Guthrie, you should probably get season tickets or something, and I'll come, And then I completely fell in love with Minnesota. I fell in love with the Playwright Center, and I started writing plays, and I fell in love with the Fringe Festival, and I signed up to do a show at the Fringe. And still thinking of it as a hobby. And anyway, flash forward a bit later, I ended up on the board of directors of the Fringe Festival, and then the executive director had a well-earned nervous breakdown, and in the aftermath, the board wanted to shut it down, and I did a little Mickey Rooney speech and said, no, it's so important to the community, we have to save it. And they said, you want to run it? And I said, okay. And so I quit being a software engineer and started running the Fringe, very much out of a desire to give something to the community that I'd already fallen in love with. And I really fallen in love with the Fringe as this important piece of the ecosystem, and didn't want to see it fail. And I thought, well, maybe if I'm going to stay here, which I still didn't believe I would do, 17 years later, I still don't believe I'll do 17 years. I thought maybe I should try to help first. And then the Fringe, I met everybody. And the next thing I knew, I was making a life in the arts.
And the Fringe is now this great wandering piece stuff.
It's a piece, it's always been a piece.
It's an amazing thing. Well, this is not only about transformation happening to us, it's also about being a I want to say a transformer, but that's one of those, things our kids play with. But Mary Ellen, I wanted to ask you, usually a composer creates music and a choreographer creates movement. You were equally interested in both, and also a math major, you probably knew that about her before.
It started out that way. Yeah.
But by combining the two, you actually affected the transformation of music. You were one of the early starters to do percussion where there's also movement and rolling around and all it's dance and theater and music when you go to see a performance. So when did you know you could make that work? Or is there a better question I should ask about that? Because that was a moment. Was there a moment?
It might have been a moment. I'd have to think about which moment it was, but it kind of, as we've already heard in stories, you have to give background before you can get to the question. So my background was that I grew up playing the flute and piano and being really passionate about those things, but I also grew up dancing. And I was making dances before I was composing music. And for me, it was because I thought I could. It's sort of like, why not? But when it came to music and composing music, that was totally intimidating to me because I thought, I grew up playing classical music. So it was the notes on the page, and it was Beethoven and Mozart and Bach. And those models told me that you had to be a teenage genius who was channeling operas when you were 16 years old, and it was somehow all very magical. But I didn't feel that about making dances. And, and I didn't, the dances that I made were things like I choreographed for my high school swing choir and for the high school musicals and the community musicals. And I used to love to, I would go to the library because it was down the street from my high school. And my dad would pick me up there and take me home. So I would have like an hour before he was done with work. And I used to love to look through some of the big dance picture books. One of my favorites was an ABT, like big, beautiful coffee table book. And I would look at a still photo and I would just imagine, now how do you suppose they got to that moment? And what do you suppose happened after that moment? And it really sparked my own creativity, where as in music, it was sort of like, well, I'll have to learn music theory first, and then I'll have to figure out, it actually didn't even occur to me that I could write music. So, fast forward a few years to college and a math major. And not so much because I was passionate about doing math. I was very good at it. But my parents were not so keen about me going into music. But within a year, I was bold enough to say, oh, this is really what I'm going to commit to. I was smart enough to start out in college taking all the music theory courses and music history that were required in music majors, so that when I decided to make that transfer, I was not behind. And I sort of came very late to the composing game compared to most of my colleagues. I did not start writing music until I was 23.
So late.
Well, it was when people were here, yeah. So, and I was emboldened because I went to the University of Minnesota. I finished at the University of Minnesota as an undergraduate, and I was taking some advanced theory courses taught by Eric Stokes and by Dominic Argento. And as part of our class assignments, we were asked to write some music. And so that kind of, because I had to, it whetted my appetite and piqued my curiosity, and it gave me a little bit of courage. So in my last year as an undergraduate, I took some composition lessons. My teacher was very encouraging, and I went straight on to graduate school of composition. I went to the University of Illinois, which also has a really big dance program, and because I loved dance, and I had been, watching video and reading about it all through my growing up years because I was just so taken with it. I found myself always gravitating over to the dance department and watching the guest artists who would come through and watching them create work, and and just because I was curious. That's how I would spend my free time. So when it came time to compose, some of my early works were with choreographers, working with choreographers, because that's where I gravitated. That's what I was familiar with, that's what I loved. And I have to admit, there were a couple times, maybe very early on, where I was making suggestions to the choreographer. I think I wanted to be on that side too. So when I left graduate school and really started working, I continued working with choreographers. And at a certain point, I think at that moment in my life, I was starting to feel a little unsatisfied with working with dance. Because I had this ideal in my head that you could work with a choreographer and you could create this sort of seamless unity of sound and movement. And in reality, what I was finding at that time was that I felt like my contribution was sort of relegated to the accompaniment. And that there was a choreographer's vision, and I was there to be the accompaniment to that. And so that's not really what I was looking for. And without making a conscious decision about it, I just stopped doing work in dance. And then again, without making a real conscious decision about it, I got interested in doing work where I was putting movement into what the musicians were doing. I do remember now the first defining moment. So it was, I had moved back to the Twin Cities, and through the Composers Forum, I had the means to put on a show, put on a full concert of my own. And I'd also grown up in high school doing a lot of theater, very involved in theater. And I think that influenced what I was doing too. So when I got to do this show at the Southern Theater, which was in 1980, it was 86, I wanted something that used the theater, so that had staging and lighting and a piece with a dancer. And so in that context, the new work that I was writing for it was a percussion piece. And I decided I wanted to use the movement of the percussion players. So I set the instruments up in a certain way. So instead of doing sort of standard drumming patterns, it required them to move in ways where I was consciously playing the movement by writing the sticking patterns and writing where they were playing on the instruments. And it kind of took off from there. The next piece after that was for claves players, where they stand shoulder to shoulder, and instead of playing claves the way you typically would, had them grab one in each hand and play, rhythms on their own in each other's claves. So I was using movement in that way, mainly exploiting the natural playing techniques of percussionists. They weren't moving around the floor. It was really just sort of building it into their arms and their sticks, things like that. And I think I felt like I knew I was onto something. At least I was onto something that I was passionate about, and that this was a world I could explore. And so I kept. At the same time, I was always writing instrumental music, but there was this other avenue that I was also really keen to explore. That sort of came from my love of dance, really, and my background in theater as well.
And were they willing?
Oh, so that's interesting. Not always. That's a very perceptive question, because although percussionists, there was a reason I decided to do this work with percussionists and not violin players.
1,000 reasons.
Yeah. So percussionists are kind of willing to do anything in a way.
Yeah.
But I did have some players take the instruments the way I had set them up with the bass drums vertical rather than horizontal. And it is more awkward to do those sticking patterns I was asking to do. And I walked into rehearsal, I forget what the group was. It wasn't I think it was the original group. And they had taken the drums, despite the diagram, clear diagram I had sent them, and they had placed them flat, and they said, it's easier this way. And I was like, yeah, I know it's easier, but there's a reason, and I had to explain it to them. And they protested a little bit. It's like, well, but how am I going to do that? I can't hit backhanded, and so we had to work out what the technique was going to be. And then, I continued to run into that somewhat often after that. But that's also why I put together my own group, because I wouldn't have to go through that every time a piece was done.
I find this all revelatory, frankly. So thank you very much, all of you. Change happens by choice, if we're lucky, by circumstance. Maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's not a good thing. sometimes we act and sometimes we react. We talked briefly about this earlier. Maybe let's have an example, and whoever wants to jump in, because we're all informal now. Well, we're going to do the front part. So, of a significant change you've made entirely or almost entirely by choice. Now is the moment I'm going to do this thing. It's a big thing. I don't know how it's going to turn out, but I'm going to do it. Does that hit a moment for any of you?
Yeah, I think I'm there now. It's taken me 50-something years to really get to a place that I'm want to make a decision and really make something happen. I think I've been a listener and a follower. So there's a project that I'm digesting and I'm gonna make it happen. And part of the reason why I'm gonna make it happen is because the journey of making something happen, right? So making a decision to make it happen. And as a dancer, flipping that coin, so as at least my experience as a dancer really has been not a follower, a collaborator, but it's been the choreographer, the artistic director, and me engaging and being a chameleon and figuring that out. But so allowing myself to actually be more of a leader of myself. And that's really only kind of culminated now, and it's taken my whole life experience to do that. So I'm really grateful of being able to have that experience in order to take a certain amount of charge, because the experience is actually what's supporting the charge and the confidence in order to say, I'm making this decision, I'm going to do this thing.
Are you at a point where you're talking about it, or can you? I figured that you might have already, but I'm asking.
No, I will be soon, but
When will we see it?
Ooh, you're good. At least a year. At least a year. At least a year.
Give her a call.
I'll call you for that. So, but in answer, this idea of taking charge specifically versus being led, and I think this is, for me, a really present time of that. And needing to, in terms of an artistic, as a woman, but also artistically, that's where my artistic growth is. That's the apparent place for it now to grow, is to take a charge, to become a collaborator in an idea and a design of what that is.
Exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about what changes are you in the midst of right now. That was going to be sort of a later question. We're going to lead up to it, but
Sorry.
there we are. No, that's good. What about, what's now for you? You're doing, Mary Ellen tells me that you travel all over the world all the time. You said a few minutes ago, I went to Spain, came back a year and a half later. It's like, what are you?
Well, actually, you know what's exciting that's happening? Bye, Erin. Love you.
Sorry, we
Great
have to
see you
go down
again.
to MBT.
Bye.
I just want to say, it seems so simple, but I want the four of you to know just how it's really extraordinary to hear people's stories. Just know that. You know, even though I've known several of you for many years, I feel like I know you more, and that's just, it's a real gift, you know? So, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Enjoy.
Yeah.
MBT.
Yeah.
It's not downstairs. It's at the bottom.
Hurry.
Shoot, thank you.
Yay, Sally! You just
Say
saved her
that.
life.
Changes are, it's actually, I've always been very, very curious. I always have been involved in theater or dance, or I've gone to see a lot of things. And so what's been happening as of late, which is very exciting, is through my movement workshop that keeps developing only because I'm hugely curious and I just keep bringing new information into what I know. And then I want to share it, and then I learn from my students, because I have to see what someone needs, and in doing that I have to develop something in order for that person to understand that better, and then I bring in a new idea. So it keeps growing. But not only that, I've had the humongous, hugest pleasure working with opera and theater and dance now, and circus. So I had a huge pleasure directing and creating a show for the National Circus School, the graduating students of the National Circus School. I didn't know anything about circus. What happened was basically they brought me in. I did a week intensive with them where they just wanted to see how I would play and work, and my workshop with them, plus create with them, dialogue with them. And that was in the fall, and then in the winter, they said, would you like to direct a show? And there were 2 shows for the two graduating levels, the 2 shows. And I said, in my head, I'm like, I don't know. They said, we think you really could do it. You'll have like, coaches and assistants, you'll have like people around you, but we want what you do in there. And I went, my first instinct was always like, I don't know what I'm doing, how can I do that? And then I went, yeah, I'll do it. And something just switches. You make a decision, because inside, that hugely curious person was very excited to play. And I thought, yeah, I just continue doing what I was doing with them for that week on a bigger scale. And now you just get to play even bigger, because you can use those things. And then they tell you that you have lots of time to experiment. And well, I just went to town and I just had so much fun. And they were on board. They were right there. You have all these coaches with you. It's not like I had to know exactly how they do that. What I got to learn a lot about that, but I also got to play and it was actually just like my workshop. We just interact, we collaborated, we had tasks, we tried different, it was the same thing, just on a much bigger scale, and it was fantastic.
You're in Montreal, correct?
Yes.
This is you said National Circus, and this is not Cirque du Soleil.
It is all somewhat on the same home. So
Okay.
the Cirque du Soleil is on the same base as the National Circus School and the residence, and the residence for Cirque du Soleil and the wardrobe, and the little theater that they practice in called Tohu Theater. And it's a circular circus theater, so it's all on the same campus, quite huge, acres. And yeah, so it's all there.
There was a huge amount of choreography in Cirque du Soleil. If anybody's seen Cirque du Soleil,
Yeah.
you can tell that they're not just
Exactly.
hanging from track.
They hire a lot of choreographers, so what's really nice is that not this year, but 2017, I'll get to do another show, but on a more individual level. So it'll be very exciting. Yeah. So one thing leads you to another. Working with opera, I'm hugely passionate about, because my mother, I was in my mommy's belly when she was always singing. She sang every day. And, so I know there's something that I get so excited to be in a room with opera singers. I just, I'm in awe, all the time. And I feel it with them.
And you're Italian.
And I'm Italian, I can't help it. What can I say? And theater as well, it goes on and on and on. I do these workshops with theater, dance. I even work with architects and leadership groups, and just so it's funny. I don't know how it happened. It's just one thing kept falling into the next, and I love doing that. So choreographies. I have to explain that when I was with NUT3, I had to sort of put my choreography on the back burner a little bit. Even though I have to say I've been choreographing since I was a little girl. I recognize your story. I mean, ever creating my own little dances, always. And bringing people in the room, my friends who didn't know how to dance, and just putting them in places. And, okay, we're going to do this, and copy me, or, just a little kid. Or just putting on shows. But I have to say, it was just really, what I'm finding, I'm going to go back to that. What I'm finding now is that, I keep saying this, everything we do in our past somehow leaves something behind that as good or bad as it was. Like, there were some horrible moments in my life that made me very, very sad about my career. which I won't need to go into, but I am so honestly grateful for them now because they really led me to where I am today, or they made me the person I am today. And I don't say we need to have those, but we learn how to use them at one point. As you get older, you start to understand and you look back and you go, oh, okay, you know what? This is why I understand this right now. I know that was really hard, but I understand this right now. And then you utilize it as part of another tool that you want to do to develop something in you or within a group. So.
And that's the longevity part of our discussions, because that's not something that you say when you're 20.
No, no.
Or even when you start composing really, really late at 23.
Yeah, 23. And there's a lot to all that, but I just wanted to get back to, you know, that latter part. But
Mary Ellen, are you doing anything specific, looking forward to any, are you in the midst of any change right now or going to make one soon?
After changing everybody's else life.
I'm not really sure. I mean, in a way, every new project, because they're all so different, there's some kind of change there. So, and I really mean it when I say I'm not really sure, is because sometimes I think I feel like something needing to change or shift, but I'm not sure what that means or how it will present itself or even when. If it's going to be next year or in 5 years or. Sometimes when you're in the middle of it, you can't see the big picture. And I do have some really interesting projects going right now, and you know, or at least one of them kind of came out of nowhere very recently, and could put me in some kind of new direction. I don't know.
Do you feel a yearning for change sometimes?
Yeah. I think
I call it a low boredom threshold. Sometimes.
A low boredom
A low boredom threshold, yeah.
Oh, I feel the need to work internationally. And that came up for, you know, the last couple of years or so, and not that it's happening yet, but it feels like it needs to. So.
And you've done that, and you've done that. What about you, Leah? You work internationally?
Only as a software engineer, we're very international.
Okay.
I mean, I did some when I was much younger, but it hasn't presented itself lately. Somehow it just feels important to, I always felt it was important to get out of town. You know, but I thought my community as a composer is not geographic. It's who are my colleagues around the country, and they became some of my closest colleagues and my closest friends.
That's one of the functions that composers forms, isn't it? It's on a more national level, it's getting people together. It's not one of the things that they do or try to do. Or maybe I'm totally off base. Never mind.
Yes, in some ways, yes, they do.
Okay.
I don't know if they do it on a large scale, but yes, some of their programs, because they involve people from around the country, can do that.
Leah, Workhouse, not Workhouse, the Wanderlust. Thank you. It seems like a pretty innovative idea. As far as going, the Wanderlust goes into the community. A recent project they're working on now is the adoption play. And they've had a series of, why am I talking about this?
You saw the ratings.
Yeah,
so
I went to,
you're
yeah. They
objective.
did a series of community meetings, and they had people who were adoptees, who were adoptive parents, who worked in the system of adoption, come in and tell their personal stories. And then they've woven these true stories and checking very carefully the truth of them with the people who told them into a play that has had a couple of readings so far. That seems like an unusual way to make a play.
It's not, I didn't invent it, I have to be very clear. And I guess it goes to this question of all the things that accumulate along the way. So I made theater for quite a while, right? And then I tried to make myself useful as a software engineer. I seem to have a compulsion to make myself useful. And then I ran Fringe and then I did Rich Consulting, and now I run the Theater Alliance, which is a service organization for all the theaters. And anyway, the point is, I've always had these two parallel tracks, right? At one point it was software and art, but at another point it was arts service, serving artists, right, and making art. And when I make art, I often miss the sense of truly transforming the community. But when I am doing service and community building, I kind of miss the artistry and the rigor and the really beautiful stuff. And so it was always this, well, I get a little bit of it here, and I get a little bit of it there, I get a little bit of here, and I get a little bit of there. But I really had a craving to synthesize. And then many years ago, Cornerstone Theater, a company in Los Angeles, who does this model of creating new plays based on the stories of real people, they were here. They did a collaboration with the Guthrie called The Falls when the Guthrie first opened. And I was invited to be on a panel with them because they thought that by running the Fringe I was a community-based artist. Clearly they were confused, but I ended up on the panel. And I spent the whole panel kind of like now a little bit mesmerized, by everything they said. And I filed it away and went, that seems like that might be the synthesis of these things. And anyway, years later, I did the Institute, and so that was sort of my first foray. And I was one of the older students. A lot of the students are like 20, 21, 22, and they're really into holding hands and sitting in circles. And I was really kind of like, this sounds exploitive, I don't know. And is the art good, or is it just cute? Like I came in really cynical because I was older, I guess, I don't know. And anyway, what I did, I wore out my tear ducts weeping at the sight of actual human transformation by the end of the Institute. And I came home and went, I want to do this. And so I picked what a lot of people told me might have been the most ambitious community I could think of. And I said, how about military veterans? We've been at war for 20 years, or 10 years, sorry, and civilians and people who serve don't understand each other's experience at all. And so I did that, but it was entirely an experiment. And I was just kind of following this sense that maybe we'd figure it out as we went, and it became huge. We did it at Fort Snelling, and the cast of 24, 14 of whom were military veterans performing. And anyway, when it was done, I was like, yes, this. And so a bunch of things kind of happened, being open to discovery. I ended up needing my husband's help. My husband's a playwright, and we've always been very careful not to collaborate. We did it once. I directed a play he wrote, and we said, let's stay married instead. Never do that again. But I really needed a strong writer to help, and I kept pulling him in, and he kind of fell in love with this community-based thing. And we discovered that we had a way of collaborating when it was community-based, because it wasn't our story, it was their story, and so it kind of kept her, it goes a check, I think, Anyway, crazy, so flash forward a bit, crazy thing is we've joined forces. He already had a company that was ensemble-driven writing, and I wanted to make a company that was community-based work, and we said, let's risk everything and form a theater company together. So that's Wonderlust, is kind of bringing our two things together to expand the spectrum of what community-driven theater making could be.
And when the two of them did that, the ground shook just a little.
Which really did in the kitchen, because it's just, it's a lot more talking, difficult things. But there's something else in all of this for me that's been really interesting. So as you said, we're working on the adoption play right now. It's all about people affected by adoption. I'm adopted. The adoption community was one of many communities on our list, and the company was like, adoption, that sounds rich. And I was like, actually, you guys, I'm in that community. I'm probably not very objective, probably not a good idea. And they're like, your story has to be in there. Your story is amazing. I was like, no, it's not. It's not about me. And so I finally agreed and said, yes, but my story won't be in there. And I've always had not wanted to think terribly much about the fact of my adoption, like it's been just kind of a background thing. Well, you spend a year listening to people's stories and reading books, and as it turns out, you can't keep those boxes closed. And so I am in this piece in a way I've never let myself be in a piece. I've always resisted that sort of personal vulnerability, to be honest. And something has happened, I think, through that has made me probably a better community-based artist, and has made me more ready to give myself permission, such a big thing, to say, okay, with the service organization thing, I know I'm going to be an artist with me in it. I don't know, that sounds really self-centered. I don't mean it that way. I just mean it's something about allowing myself to be vulnerable
Sounds
to
more
the art of
valuable than
making.
anything else.
And I don't think, and I'm 47 years old, I don't think I could have done that until now.
Do you find, this idea of creating a place, a space, a company, a school, a community, these things, as you are an artist, this separation place of the artist and creating this place, and they intersect, but there's a sidebar. And because I'm feeling like I'm dealing with this sidebar I dealt with this sidebar as an artist for many years because I wanted to create a place And so my own not selfish, but my own self-artistry has been almost put on the side. And how to bring those, actually, how to bring those together. It's more, I just got sparked by kind of this idea of, as we are our individual artists, and as we start creating for others, a place, a thing for others, that the individual artist piece, I mean, I consciously made a decision to kind of put it in the nest and leave it, and maybe not give it attention, or because of the life actually that I actually was able to live as an artist. And I sometimes feel like that was my selfish Toni, and now this is my community Toni. But how do we, actually really merge them, or how do I merge them and fully live the artist, which is that individual, and then that community developer that is so much about others, and that dichotomy between self and others as an artistic vision. I think I found it is really challenging to actually marry them, and so I look forward for that, hopefully.
I guess the thing I'm trying to describe that I've just discovered is that maybe I can do better for others when I still let myself be in it,
So you discovered that through kind of deciding on it?
Yeah, through maybe because of the seduction play,
Yeah.
because it forced me to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I've always been given a lot of credit for a kind of egoless style of leadership that says, no, you guys, let me empower you guys. And that's always been my MO, and people have given me a lot of praise for it. But all of my collaborators are saying, actually, you stepping fully in and being vulnerable is better. You're still empowering, it's in your nature. So I'm learning something there. I don't know, my husband made the funniest comparison. We were talking about this, I'm going to make myself blush by sharing it. He said art making when you're collaborating is like sex. It's only good if you're trying to enjoy it too.
But you know what, I just came out of a performance before I came here. I hadn't performed in about 2 years, and the last 2 years have been very rich, very full, and my work is very much like that. It's not about me. It's like when I'm directing, it's not me directing, it's actually I'm just feeding information to create an environment where people just are going to feel comfortable enough to go there, right? And that's what I'm aiming for all the time, but it's really coming from that, so on and so forth. But what I found, when I came back, it was about, I wanted to share what I know and then continue to learn and grow so I can keep sharing and growing, but giving. And so in the last couple of years, I haven't been wanting to perform because I really wanted to focus on choreography and directing and all the stuff I was doing. And then finally this choreographer has been wanting to work with me for many years. I do this show that's been leading in Vancouver just before I came here to full out sold houses. It was a great success. But the success was that when I was performing, this is something I wanted to say, I realized something that felt very different than even just 2 or 3 years ago. There was something different that took over in the way I thought about performing, how I performed, who I was on stage. It wasn't really performing, I was just being present fully in the moment that I had to be in. So I no longer was performing per se, it was actually just being in the moment, in the real moment of what that was all about. And it was just really living the moment. And I think it was from all the work I was sharing with all my colleagues and all my students and all the dancers and all the artists I've been working with in theater, dance, and so on and so forth. So I no longer, it wasn't going out to perform, I was just going out to, like I was sharing before, I was just sharing what I have inside me, and it wasn't about performing it, I was just being it. And there's some kind of click that happens. So, and in it, I feel like I can go back and forth. There's no back and forth, it's actually what it is.
I think what I've seen you all say is that, it's not linear, it's all connected. Well, all these experiences are connected, and And that you listen, you're listening, and you're finding that maybe this, that happened over here or with this person, but it is somehow all connected, and that's how it works. And also, I think it's a fearlessness that you must have, that you can take that next step, which
It's
is
definitely part of it, I think.
amazing.
It's part of the longevity, I think it's part of
Part of
the
the longevity?
longevity. There is something that happens.
But fear is a son of a bitch. Did you take that? You know, and you know, when you compare this sense of when you're youthful, right, and you're whatever you're doing, and then, you know, this balance between brilliance and understanding. So when you understand something as you're making a decision, there is this beautiful thing, thank you for fear, but fear can come into that. And then we deal with that fear factor, and so that fortifying, no, that's not the word, that pushing through that, all of these elements, but the fearful of, you know, because moving forward in different stages of our lives is quite unknowing, right? So it's really, as we continue to go back on ourselves, I always say to my students, like, you are creating your own history. So what you just made this amazing thing happen is yours. So if you can do that, use that as the next thing that you do.
That's what everybody's been talking about.
Yeah, we create our own history, and so you know, this element of fear because of the knowing. When we don't know, what is there to be fearful? But so as we get older and more, I don't even like older, but as we move
Wise
through.
Experience.
Well, as we move through, I don't know. But as we move through, there are moments of hesitation, but then when the decision, because I think it becomes sometimes about a decision,
Yes.
right? I'm not just
Yes.
depending on the
Yeah, yeah.
world all the time to
Yeah.
support me, or these
Yeah.
amazing choreographers to come in and pay me. That's not happening anymore, you know? You know, we are making these decisions which become quite powerful. You know, they create a lot of weight, a lot of vibration. Those are big things that we move through. That's why I look
I
at it.
think they're bigger because there's fear inside of them, and we can let that be contained in there.
Mhm.
I don't know, I feel like longevity as an art maker is very much about balance, right? Like, can I be fearless and can I be afraid in a vulnerable way? Can I have the courage of, I no longer feel like I have to prove myself,
Mhm.
right? But can I have the humility that lets me keep learning?
Mhm.
And, you know, can I dash forward when an opportunity arises and a discovery is in front of me and not be afraid to seize on it? But can I also know when there's this thing that I'm just starting to really discover is, you know, there's a certain amount of simmer that's really important, and to trust
Mm.
in that patience of, if you don't know yet, you will.
Yeah.
You know, so I just feel like it's this constant dance of, and as I get more experience and maturity, hopefully, I find that balance more comfortable. That's the thing I think I'm most grateful for with aging.
Let me jump in as the timekeeper. We wanted to wrap things up by 2:30 because people have things that they have to go and do. So I wanted to leave a little time if anybody has questions and I have all these other questions, you know, that were planned as if these women would have nothing to say. And I found the personal stories really fascinating, the directions that this conversation has taken, really interesting. Thank you very much for all of that. But does anybody have a question that they want to ask, anybody in particular, or an observation that they want to make in the time we have remaining?
I have one.
Yes, please.
Can each of you define retirement?
Oh.
What is retirement?
Huh.
Yes.
That's a great question.
Yeah, boy.
And I said this, I was teaching a class a few days ago, and I was talking about David Howard, who taught until 89 or something, and I took a class with him that last year, and he never retired. And his voice was as present as the first class I took with him 30 years before that class. But
And you were talking about Elliott Smith?
Elliott Carter, yeah,
sorry.
one of my
Elliott
heroes,
Carter,
the music's
yes.
Elliott Carter, who lived to the age of 100, composer who lived to the age of 103, composing. He celebrated his 100th birthday with a premiere of a new work. He wrote, I think, at least 40 new pieces between the ages of 90 and 100. And so he's sort of like, that's what I aspire to. So by that standard, I have like half my career ahead of me. And I love thinking about it that way, that I'm half my career ahead of me.
I don't think about it. Honestly, I just don't think about retirement. I can't define it. I don't think about retirement. She does.
Sorry, I didn't mean to, my face, I'm so sorry.
My mind's good. Your mind is shitting it over to the next thing. Because honestly, I have nothing more to say
Oh,
about
I think about retirement every morning.
Retirement from what?
That's the question.
it. There you go.
Because I think, yeah, I yearn to not actually be in command of something else, which is my life. What my life has carved out for me, which is this amazing thing. And I'm very grateful, but it's also very wearing and tearing. And so I think about retiring, I think about retiring, and we know that's absurd, but what does that actually mean? What does retirement really mean? I mean, when we left Ailey, you know, it was always, oh, you're retiring.
From this apartment, from this thing.
Well, but that was the, right, so there's life after Ailey. I'm going back to that, right? So.
Oh, and by the way, Ailey is coming to Norfolk season 2. I
Yes.
didn't mean to reject that, and I forget it, so I want to mention that as well.
Well, that's exciting.
So defining retirement, I shift it and look forward to an aspect of my life that I would retire from, and look forward to whatever the next thing is. I'm gonna have to do something, but laying on a beach sounds awfully good.
Well, it's funny,
There's gestation in that, sorry.
as we were talking about today, that word came up, and we made a decision to not include it.
The R word?
Yes, the R word, but also I've been thinking about it while you've been talking, that I just feel like the concept of retirement has changed so much in the last 2 decades.
Not the gold watch and the pension.
Yeah, it's
Oh, yeah.
completely changed.
Yeah.
So I guess I feel like it's kind of an antiquated term now. It doesn't really reflect what I see happening with very many people.
The reason that I asked the question is not in this idea of at 60 I'm gonna retire and I'm gonna be in the cabin up north, blah, blah, blah. But it's about what I see so much passion in each of the panelists for the arts and their work and their legacies and working with the community and the inspiration of this composer, blah, 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 blah. It is, what is that for an artist? You know, is where does the artist say this is enough?
I think
If any, you know, I'm
It'll come to you at the time that
We
it's
don't run
supposed to.
out of things.
I don't think we no longer, I don't think we no longer say, oh, you know, at 65, that's it, I'm retiring. I think it'll come to us. It could be at any time, at one point, really, now, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, Jiri Kylian even said he hired dancers for MBT3, 40 till death. So that says a lot, right?
Yeah, I think this idea of going from a producer to solely a consumer is just kind of out of date and maybe doesn't work for artists so much. Like, I could imagine not being in charge. I also have I've been in charge a lot, and I have my days when I'm like, I could just maybe not make so many decisions. Or fundraise so much or whatever. But I can't imagine not making things. I might get much more interested in making bread and cheese than making theater,
And that's happened.
right? You know,
Yes.
but I can't imagine not making. I think it would be, that wouldn't be retirement, it would be death, to not be making. Maybe it has to get physically smaller, it has to get, you know, whatever it turns out my body limits me, whatever that turns out to be. I had this interesting learning thing. So my father has Alzheimer's, and he's been very zen about it. It's been kind of a gift. But he always only had intellectual pursuits. And he has just enough clarity now to know he has Alzheimer's and to know his limits. And he said something kind of sad to me. He said, I said, what do you do with yourself? And he said, I'm so bored. He said, I only cultivated intellectual pursuits. I didn't cultivate physical or spiritual. And it turns out you don't know which of those you're going to lose when you get older.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, and he said, I wish I cultivated some physical and some spiritual things because I can't learn new things now. He's got an 8-minute loop memory, you know. So this was an amazing moment of lucidity that he shared with me. And And I thought, oh, maybe that's an important thing about, for me, aging is choosing a way that I can make with many sides of myself, because I don't know which part of me will fade first. I don't want to lose the ability to make, you know.
And that's
So my-
interesting about, oh, sorry.
Just really quickly, I'll just say, I was just remembering something about Elliot Carter, who when he got older, so he didn't retire, but when people asked him for a commission, he would only take the commissions he wanted to do, and he'd say, I'll finish it when I finish it, no deadlines. So maybe that's what happens, it's a transformation from doing it on your terms.
I was just noticing the math artist brain in me view, and I have that too, and I think it's part of what keeps that balance. It doesn't have to be math, but I think math is great for dancers because dance, it's like, there's many ways this can be right, you know, and math, it's like, there's many ways to get to it, but there's one right answer, you know, and it's just, it really satisfies both sides of me. And I think there's just so many dimensions to balance. And I think that Dance Magazine was doing an article this month on longevity in dancers. I think so. They interviewed me for it, so I thought it was October, maybe it's November.
Oh,
I don't get it. I'll look for it somewhere. But they kept asking me how it was possible to last so long, and I talked about intellectual balance and curiosity and hunger and just being, you know, not interested in being Madonna and reinventing myself all the time and daily. It's like having the time to just recede back and raise chickens or whatever it is I want to do, and that's just what I'm doing right now. But anyway, you know, just knowing that dances have a certain kind of life. I think Martine Van Hemel said that to me. I thought that was really amazing. It's been true. You sort of know when to revive a certain dance, and also yourself when to jump into an improv. It's usually the moment you want to jump in is the exact moment you should stay out. It's just a really interesting ego thing. It's proved true. But I think that this balance thing, they kept saying things like, well, what's your nutrition like, and what is your cross-training? It's like, nothing, that's all gone to hell. I just do what I want. But the intellectual pursuit is what's kept me going. It's the balance of, you know, what I'm interested in watching, and what classes I'm interested in taking, and all this stuff. They won't print any, but I'm sure you guys. They'll print what I eat, I'm sure.
I was really interested to hear you all talk about fear, because I think when I think about aging, one of the things is that your fears change in some way. So I would say that in a weird way, you know, as I get older, I feel like there's more security, and that may be literally, you know, financial and physical, well, not physical, I fall on the ice, but, you know, I mean, a different kind of security, but also just confidence and a sense of not having an endless amount of time to do what you want to accomplish. So I tend to think of the transformations as we get older as being more rooted in a kind of confidence that doesn't, so the fearful stages don't take us long or whatever. So I'm curious about how you experience the transformation in terms of that kind of confidence and experience that you were talking about, Leah. And thinking about this new project.
Yeah, I brought up fear, didn't I? How did that one?
I think fear transforms itself. For example, when we say fear, as you age, I think that they also age. Fear, the sense of fear, how you see fear, how you feel fear. I was always very fearful when I was young. Still am always. I'm fearful of many things, but fearful of how I'm going to do. And I think it's how we approach it now. I think as we get older, we approach fear differently. Or I've trained myself to approach it differently because I'm getting older and it's accumulated. The experience has accumulated itself into how to deal with it, to know it's always present, so you're going to, it feeds you, all those things.
I was never fearful. Like fear wasn't a part of my, New York City, I'm so glad I wasn't fearful.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that was actually my strength. So I think I don't want to say I learned fear, because fear is a part of us, so it's not something that's abstract and somewhere else. I think it has, where its place in my life has shifted. And I think I'm responding to fear for me as a good thing because I didn't have it. And I'm here this time in my life with some graces. So I think fear has shifted itself. And if I allow it to be something that stops me, then that's problematic. But if I allow it to be something that helps me move through so that the things that I stand on are actually, I have much more confidence because I've dealt with the aspects more than the just go out and hang out, do it. But really it propels itself and puts itself in a position that I actually welcome it so that I can look at it and then move through it.
And it's so rewarding to find yourself on the other side.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you want me to say something about this?
Would you?
Okay.
Or one of us can.
Career Transition for Dancers panel, Monday, October 19th from 5:30 to 7 at the Coles. And this is, you know, where they're taking individual appointments as well, the 19th and 20th. Careertransition.org, this is a national organization, correct?
Yes, but this, there's a office in Chicago. So
Okay.
they come in every once in a while and do these workshops and try to get connected to people in the community that want some.
So what, is anybody here interested in this? What should they do? Take this piece of paper, perhaps?
Sure. There's also, I know it's been posted in the dance newsletter.
Which
Okay.
is where that information
Okay.
came from, so it's the other information.
So and I would
Dance
guess, given that
newsletter.
it's coming up, that they'll post it again if you know of anybody who might be interested.
It's free.
It's great.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I feel much smarter, I don't know about you. Yes.
Yeah.